It's the Real News. I'm Aaron Mate, part two with Issa Blumi. He is associate professor at Stockholm University and author of Destroying Yemen, What Chaos in Arabia Tells Us About the World. So we're talking about the Saudi-US agenda behind the attack on Yemen. And I want to go to a clip from PBS NewsHour, which recently spoke to residents of Yemen who expressed their frustration at the US role in the Saudi-led bombing.
The weapons which come from United States. Mr. Obama or the other presidents, he said we will help Saudi Arabia for the war in Sana'a. And the new one, Trump, he said we will support our friend. What does it mean? He support them to tell us.
The missiles that killed us, American made. The plane that kills us, American made. The tanks, Abrams, American made. You're saying to me, where is America? America is the whole thing.
So that's a clip from PBS NewsHour, and it stands out as being one of the few U.S. media reports on the U.S. role, especially in the attack on Yemen. To illustrate, the group FAIR recently put out a story by Adam Johnson, which noted that it's been over 1 year since MSNBC, the leading liberal network, did even a segment on Yemen. And by contrast, they said that MSNBC during that period did 455 stories on Stormy Daniels versus 0 on Yemen. So Professor Blumi, if you could comment here on just how critical the US role is in the Saudi-led attack on Yemen. Could it be going on without US support?
It's so critical that actually it's an inaccuracy to call it a Saudi-led attack. It's actually an American, UK, if we're going to be generous to the tiny empire, campaign against an insubordinate corner of the world. We've seen pictures now of the control room in which American soldiers are behind all the buttons that need to be pressed, and they're the ones who are looking into the monitors that will then identify the targets. And again, they're the ones who have long mastered, originally in Yemen, by the way, the double tap technique of maximizing the kill around an initial attack. So the Americans are front and center responsible. Now, which Americans? Now, Aaron, you're an American, and your team in the studio are Americans. You're not responsible, and I assure you, Yemenis are fully cognizant of that. But they do also know very well that without the kinds of mobilization of people like yourself, the media, the very fact that MSN, the mainstream media, does not report on this suggests just how complicit the centers of power of corporate finance and political actors across the board, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, are in understand the importance of shutting up about this war. There are consequences to this war failing. There are consequences of this war dragging on as it is. It's a very lucrative war, and it's also has a very interesting long-term structural consequence for the entire region, which I think some actors in Washington and in the larger Atlantic world are actually gearing up for. I can elaborate later. But the Americans are front and center, solely responsible for this war continuing on as it is.
So we have to wrap. So let me ask you, how is it lucrative, and how does it fit into those structural benefits that you're talking about?
Military industrial complex, obviously. Weapons contractors, they're the ones who are getting paid up front. There is no check which will never be paid or that it will be balanced. They're getting money up front. Saudi Arabia is borrowing money left and right, hand over fist. The ruling family has been arresting cousins and other billionaires in the region to pay for their bills for this war, which means that some companies that construct the weapons, who offer the logistical support, who provide the PR. Think about all those companies in Washington and London who are getting paid to cover up this campaign, who are providing the kinds of weapons, the word weapons, the language for us to all end up being distracted by Iran, by Saudi Arabia, by the Houthis. In fact, this is a campaign to restructure entirely the regional economy, assure that China, assure that other rivals to the Atlantic empire does not gain a foothold in exactly these areas where the last remaining untapped natural resources remain, from the fisheries, from the mines, from the oil and gas, to the strategic choke points like the Bab el-Mandab, which Israel just 2 days ago has in bluster said that they will help the Saudis and others defend from Iranian encroachments. So we're beginning to start seeing the relationship between the exploitation of natural resources, the damming, for instance, in Ethiopia of the Nile, Blue Nile, is all part of this long-term project to completely reorientate the region to become an interesting kind of self-sufficient, grand-scale productive zone for agriculture, for industrialization, and not necessarily a move away from oil and gas, but a kind of utility of whatever kinds of resources, what kind of financing they can get from their oil and gas to reorientate these economies. But Yemen is in the way. The family in Saudi Arabia is in desperation. This is why they were on board to initiate this war. They've been in competition with their GCC partners, and this war will end up very badly for Saudi Arabia. And that, for that reason, is why structurally the Middle East will look very differently in 10 years, if not sooner.
We'll leave it there. Issa Blumi, Associate Professor at Stockholm University, author of Destroying Yemen, What Chaos in Arabia Tells Us About the World. Professor Blumi, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.